The most effective mental enslaving lies are those that are mixed with a little bit of truth. This is the case regarding the black Jews, white Jews debate. Yes, it is a true fact that the Caucasian Jews do not actually have a biological lineage to the ancient Jews. Okay, they are in fact descendants of European Kharja Jews that merely converted to Judaism. It is also a true fact that there are Africans that are designated as the true ancient Jews. However, the Bible's account of the Jews is a total work of fiction. I was very reluctant to speak on this subject because many may think that I'm endorsing the Bible or endorsing the story about the black Hebrews. But that's not the case at all. I'm not endorsing that the Bible's account is a total work of fiction. Okay, it is not true. The history and birthright of Africans that are historically designated as being the true Jews was stolen by Europeans and then inflated with fiction. The accounts found within the Bible represent that work of fiction. In addition to falsely making themselves Jews, a sect of Europeans also created an entirely false history, Jewish history, that falsely exalts themselves as being God's chosen people. Critically think. An infallible God would never create a narrative that one group of people is chosen over others. For all good parents know that it's bad parenting to openly declare one child as being a favorite above all others. Certainly an infallible God also knows this fact. The narrative of a chosen people has the fingerprints of human vanity all over it. The Caucasians' inherent narcissistic tendencies for creating a false history that falsely exalts themselves resulted in a sect of Caucasians that merely converted into Jews, creating a false, elaborate history that exalts their group. Currently, there's an established fear of challenging the legitimacy of white Jews because they use their history of persecution, which includes the Holocaust, as proof of anti-Semitism when any person or group challenges it. Anyone attempts to question their legitimacy are labeled as being anti-Semitic. This enabled the white Jews to protect the heavily guarded fact that there's no real connection between them and ancient Jews. Moreover, they always use the anti-Semitic. Whenever someone's child says anything. But however, the term anti-Semitic is not even historically accurate. The original definition of Semitic did not include Europeans. The term of being Semitic was originally used exclusively for Afro and Afro-Asiatic people. It originally excluded white-skinned people. This is why in 1847, when Joseph Helvet, a French Jew, visited black Jews in Ethiopia, they commented on seeing a traveler with white skin saying he was Jew. They were shocked. In other words, the black Jews could hardly believe that he was a Jew. Why? Because it wasn't known for Jews to be white. Even the ancient Romans said, Tacitus, the Roman historian, wrote that in his days, the Jews were black. He said the Jews came from Ethiopia, the lands of the blacks. These are facts that many white biblical scholars have chosen to ignore. The white Jews, who are well-financed and extremely well-organized, are shielded from any type of criticism, any type of questioning, anything, by using the title of anti-Semitic. The irrefutable fact is that the European Jews that presently occupy Israel are in no way whatsoever connected to ancient Jews. They are the descendants of the Kharja Jews of Eastern Europe, those who survived World War II. Their ancestors merely converted to Judaism. They were settled in modern-day Israel between 1945 through 1947 with massive financial support from the United States and the United Nations. The groups whose lineage actually includes a Jewish one are the Ethiopian Jews called the Falashas, a word meaning stranger or exile in the modern Ethiopian language. They call themselves Beta Israel, which means the house of Israel. Scholars have found reference of Jews in Ethiopia and Greek writing dating back 200 years before Christ. In 1970, after a Marxist government assumed power in Ethiopia and began persecuting the Ethiopian Jews, they wrote many letters to the white Jews of Israel, to America and the UN, asking for help in relocating to Israel. They said that if a nation has been built for the Jews, then it is their birthright to be moved to the newly formed state of Israel. Now, although those Ethiopians were designated as Jews for thousands of years, long before the Europeans merely converted, however, their pleas for help were ignored, and immigration was barred, and the way out was paved with perils. Despite the Marxist government's oppression of those black Jews, the European Jews did not act to help them in spite of their persecution. There was no help until 1973. That's 28 years of waiting. America and the United Nations and the UN moral obligation to invest millions of dollars to create the state of Israel for the European Jews is particularly noteworthy considering against the near 30 years of the black Jews were suffering. Surely millions of black Jews suffered and died during such a long period that their letters went unheard. Help did not come to the Philistine Jews until the 1970s, after their persecution became publicized around the world, subsequently damaging the image of the European Jews, which led to them recognizing the fact and now assisting the Ethiopian Jews. The U.S. and Israel put together a covert plan called Operation Moses to airlift these African Jews to Israel. Naturally, of course, they had fairly propaganda. They put up propaganda showing the kindness of the Europeans while concealing the fact that they made them wait for 30 years before helping them. Still, the white Jews refused to accept those black Jews as being the true Jews. A chief rabbi of Israel imposed a false narrative upon them as being subordinate Jews. They created the narrative that the Ethiopian Jews come from the seed of Israel, who dwells in from the tribe of Dan, which dwells in the mountains of Ethiopia. This made the black Jews, who were the original ones, into subordinate sect of Jews. And forced them to accept that subordinate status. Even now, they are not treated as equals and live in separation from the white Jews within designated areas. Within many areas in Israel, the black Jews are not permitted to enter the same synagogue as the whites or to even bury their dead in the same cemetery. During the 1980s, when an African-American, 1990s, an African-American senators, Cynthia McKinney and Jesse Jackson visited Israel, they found that the majority of those jailed were those black Jews. Now, although a sect of Europeans that originally merely converted to Judaism stole in the designation of the Jews, it still doesn't make the story of the Bible correct. The accounts found within the Bible are a total work of fiction. In addition to falsely making themselves into Jews, the European created an entirely false history that exalts themselves as God's chosen people. Now, many of us black people insist that that false title belongs to us. They fool us, now we're fooling ourselves. There are black people of Africa that are designated as the true ancient Jews. But the story is not, their story is not the false story as told in the Bible. There is no evidence of the existence of Jews ever being in Egypt. According to Exodus 12:40, the Israelites lived in Egypt for 430 years. The Bible mentions Egypt more than 700 times, yet there's no mention of Israel in any Egyptian history, nor any archaeological evidence outside of biblical scriptures. In case you don't know, biblical scriptures are not facts. There is no evidence of a leader named Moses. There is no synagogue. There's no mention of Jews or 10 plagues in the extensive history of Egypt. We have no clue, not even a single word about the early Israelites in Egypt. Neither in monumental inscription on the walls in the temple, nor in the tomb inscription, nor in papyri. Israel is absent as a possible foe of Egypt, as a friend of Egypt, or as an enslaved nation. If the story of Jews being in Egypt was true, there would have been some evidence of the account of having assimilated into the culture, but there is none. Now, the Jews, the Egyptians are known because they left such a large legacy. They've written so much. Everyone knows about them. But there's no evidence of Israel ever being in Egypt. None. Most importantly, the Egypt's records themselves have no mention of anything recorded in Exodus. Egyptians wrote extensively. They're known for that. The hieroglyphs, we're known for that. But there's nothing, no evidence at all upon the walls of Egypt. Nothing, no proof at all. In its entire long documented history, there's no story of an enslaved Jewish people in Egypt being written even once. There's no name of a man named Moses, nor is there a story about the Red Sea parting even mentioned. Now, certainly if the Red Sea actually parted to allow the Jews to walk through and then rejoin itself to drown a pharaoh and his army, such an event would have been recorded, would have been documented in Egypt, would have been on their walls, would have been somewhere. But it's not. It's not, because the story is a total work of fiction. Furthermore, says Imam Mizer, a professor at the Institute of Archaeology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, he said no Jews built the pyramids, because Jews did not exist at the period when the pyramids were being built. It wasn't until over 600 years after the last of the large pyramids were built that the state of Israel came into existence. And over 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid had been built. This is irrefutably proven, because the pyramids and the Sphinx are older than the biblical timeline of when Shem was born. It was built before the first Jew was even born. The entire story is a work of fiction. According to the biblical scholar, Shem survived the flood 4,300 years ago. However, according to experts, the Pyramid of Giza is around 12,000 years or older. Leading experts find that the Sphinx is several times thousand years even older than that. Now, since they were both much older than the story of Shem, then it's not humanly possible that Jews built the pyramid. Do you know that ancient Egypt is also older than the timeline of when Adam and Eve were created? Which also proves that Adam and Eve were not the first people on earth, and it shows a work of fiction. The Sphinx is older than the Adam and Eve timeline. The Bible is a complete work of fiction. According to the biblical timeline, they calculate that Adam and Eve came into creation between 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. As I just said, the Great Sphinx is over 12,000 years. The Great Pyramid is over 12,000 years. So therefore, you see, it doesn't make any sense. When you look at facts, there are so much holes in the Bible in terms of religion. There's so many holes in it that if it was a ship, you could never take it out to sea because it will sink. But yet people live their lives by it, ignoring all these holes within the system. It is a work of fiction. Our plight has nothing to do with the Bible. Yes, there's been lying and misrepresentation, but that's not our story. There were no Jews ever in bondage in Egypt. When we gear our minds, okay, then we were stripped of our history. So now we're going to take the Bible and we're going to put ourselves in the Bible. So, okay, this is our history. That's total bullshit. Usually people have a right to believe what they want to believe, but the oppressed must function based upon what is true. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all liberating remedies that stems from those will be flawed. The Bible is a complete work of fiction. They tell you that Eve was the first woman that was made, and she came from the river of man, and she lived between 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. But they found women's bodies that's much older than that. They found women's bodies, Lucy, millions of years old. Women's bodies in South Africa, 1,000,000 years old. They found mummies of women in Egypt that are older than Eve was. So come on now. We must wake up to our reality. The Bible is a work of fiction. When we try to assign our plight to a Bible brutally beaten upon us, we are going to stay mentally enslaved. We will never liberate ourselves, limiting our minds, limiting our thinking to the radius of a Bible written by our enemies, to the limit of a radius of a Bible brutally imposed upon us by our enemies. We must function based upon what is truth. You know, the white man have tricked us with the ideology that everyone's entitled to their own truth. That's what they created. But the white man created that ideology because he benefits from lies. The white society sits upon a throne of lies. That's why he propagates that narrative. He benefits from lies. But here's the reality. There's no such thing as many truths as the white man has manipulated you to believe. There's either the truth or there's a lie. If you're not functioning based on what is true, you are therefore functioning based on a lie. While other groups may have the luxury of functioning based upon lies, not the oppressed. The oppressed must function based on what's true, because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our liberating remedies will be flawed. This is why those who know must teach. We must function based on what is true. When we limit ourselves to a Bible written by our enemy, that is idiotic. But it also limits our existence. We were building kingdoms long before the Bible was even written. It limits our story to such a small one. It limits our story. Even the story of Adam and Eve, you see how they use the narrative. They said that the woman comes from the rib of a man, and therefore she's a subordinate to a man. She came at the request of a man. No woman ever came from the rib of a man. But that narrative is fed into a society and it's been used to make women subordinately inferior to men, inherently superior. Even though the truth is every man has come from a woman, but no woman has ever come from a man. But you see how that false narrative is used and compelled and people function based upon the false narratives? We must learn how social science work. One love and peace, brothers and sisters. One love and peace.